Hello. This is Gretch from the I Am CEO podcast, and I wanted to create this video just to kind of go through everything that I usually explain when I do the intro calls for people that are on the podcast. First and foremost, I truly appreciate your time, truly appreciate you for taking some time out to even consider being on the show. One of the things that I really hope to do was to make this as efficient as possible, not just for our team and everything that we do, but also for yourself, because I know time is definitely precious, and that's the whole kind of idea of the podcast. So the I Am CEO podcast is kind of an offshoot of an offshoot. Basically, I have a community of niche blogs I started out with called CEO Blog Nation, and at the heart of it, our mission is really to increase the success rate of entrepreneurs and business owners, and kind of do that from a two-part mission, which is to celebrate entrepreneurs and business owners, tell their stories, provide an opportunity to kind of showcase them, and then also provide resources to help out business owners as well. So every piece of content that we have on our blog sites kind of hits one, if not both parts of the mission. Everything we do is try to be in alignment to increase the success rate of business owners. And I'm a strong believer that a lot of that has to do with the resources that you have at your disposal, but also just having visibility, because a lot of times I always say, as a digital marketer, the name of the game is often being found. So you have great products, you have great services, but no one knows who you are. So this is how, we're kind of trying to combat that from a two-part mission. The types of content that we have across our different blog sites are everything from books that we have that get reviewed, guest posts, email interviews, obviously podcast interviews. We're doing a lot more video content over the next couple of years, but the goal is really that every piece of content hits one, if not both parts of that mission. And last year in 2018, I actually had what was a weekly podcast called the CEO Chat podcast. And that kind of morphed from, just recording interviews I was doing with business owners already for the blog. And I decided to take those recordings, make it into a podcast. And last year, the goal was for it to be a weekly podcast. And in it being a weekly podcast, I would basically alternate between doing a digital marketing topic that I spoke about, because I have a digital marketing company, and then also basically to interview an entrepreneur and business owner. So basically what I did, every other week is I would, basically have a topic that I wanted to focus on. And it was all, created to create the UR Media Company course that launched at the end of the year. But really the goal was to kind of look at, holistically all of everything related to marketing, and the goal in between those was to actually interview entrepreneurs and business owners. So 30 minutes to an hour long interviews, and usually had like different questions and everything each time. And the great thing about that is I really got to interview a lot of phenomenal business owners. The good and bad of it was I also was able to book myself out for most of the year at the beginning of the year in the first and second quarter. And that was also the bad, just because I love doing the interviews. I love, interviewing the entrepreneurs and business owners and really gleaning as much information from them as possible. I think it's definitely made me a better business owner. But because I booked myself out in the first or second quarter of the year, I pretty much didn't have a lot of slots left. I also didn't have the efficiency of the process that I could potentially ramp it up. So for lack of a better phrase, I went into the lab, which is I sometimes nickname exactly where I do the podcast, the lab. And I really went to work on something that I wanted to kind of make that would be efficient and effective, also be laser focused, and also could potentially ramp up into being a daily podcast. So that's where the I Am CEO podcast came about, launched in July of last year being 2018. And the goal is really to ask 6 set questions. The podcast itself is split into 2 parts, right in alignment with the mission. The first of which is to provide visibility for the business owner, so to learn more about the story, services they provide, what makes them unique. And the second half is to learn those efficiency hacks and resources and things that they use and leverage and swear by that can make other entrepreneurs successful and effective and efficient. So this has kind of been the first creation organization that has had all those things in mind. So super excited about that and trying to hit, multiple goals at the same time simultaneously through creating every single podcast interview. But basically, for the show, I have them on Mondays and Fridays. I usually block out about 30 minutes of time. Prior to me hitting the record button, I usually ask if you want to do audio and video or just audio. Either or is fine. I usually just ask that because we will repurpose the video content at a later date. So I usually just ask just to see, whatever, works best for you. And either way is fine. Basically, if we end up talking for, let's just say 20 minutes, because I think 15 to 20 minutes is kind of like the sweet spot for their interviews, then we'll repurpose the video content essentially as is, whereas the podcast itself will be around that 15 to 16 minute standpoint that we always kind of focus on. But I start out the show by reading your bio. I go right into the first question. The first question is your CEO story. So that's essentially like your background. We'll let you just start your business, your experience. And then from there, I'll go into the second question. And that is basically how you serve the clients that you work with. So I'll ask you how you serve the clients that you work with. That is basically your products and services. So what you do to kind of help support them. If you have a podcast, what exactly that product is and what exactly that does. If you have a YouTube channel, whatever that is. If you have a traditional business, then of course, the products and services that you're providing from that standpoint. That's the second question. The third question I'll ask you is for what I call your secret sauce. And your secret sauce is essentially your unique selling proposition, your differentiator. It's what you feel kind of sets you apart. And it could be for you or your organization. And a lot of times that overlaps, especially for founders, that I find that a lot of times the business itself kind of takes on a life in the philosophy and the values of the founder or founders of the organization. So again, it could be separate, it could be the same, but again, the idea is so that it flows directly through, so you get to tell your story, you get to learn about yourself, your background, your business, and what makes you unique. After that, what I'll do is I'll pivot into the second half of the interview. And the second half is the pay it forward section. And the pay it forward section is really focused on learning some behind the scenes things that you do to be effective and efficient. I think also, I usually always mention this for people that are in the B2B audience or looking to connect with the B2B audience or provide services to the B2B audience, or maybe created a book or whatever it is that you might have done that you want other entrepreneurs and business owners to learn from. The goal for this section is really to learn more about things that you do related to that. And it could be, I usually ask it directly, from your standpoint, but you could answer it in a number of ways. And I'll go through that in a little bit. But the idea is that the interview itself is broken into two parts. So a lot of times people want to basically showcase one of the services or products that they have. So they might spend more time on the second half of the interview versus the beginning of the interview, which is a little bit more learning about you. But the idea is, I think the best interviews, again, around that 15 to 20 minute standpoint, just because, we don't have to do a tremendous amount of editing, because you never want to edit too much out, but we want to make sure that we stand true to that, 16 minute or so standpoint time frame. So the first of those pay it forward questions, and that's the section that I call it, I'll ask you for what I call a CEO hack. And this could be an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but the idea is it's something that makes you more effective and efficient. So I've had people mention books like the E-Myth. I've had people mention, apps and software like scheduling apps, project management apps like Asana. One of the most consistent ones have been morning routines. Those have come up consistently. Super smoothie. I had a guy who mentioned, a guest who mentioned the super smoothie that he makes every morning. Or I had a lady who also talked about how she puts cacao in a drink that she makes in the morning, meditating, working out. There's a tremendous amount of things that you probably don't even think about that you do that other entrepreneurs can kind of incorporate into their day-to-day activities. So the idea is there's no right or wrong answers, whatever works for you and other business owners can kind of learn from. But again, If, for example, like you have created something that's for the B2B audience, then maybe you want to touch on something that you created and why you created. And again, that aligns more than likely with the story that you told already. So that might be your CEO hack, and that might be exactly why you created it, because there was nothing there. So that's the first of those pay it forward questions. The second of those pay it forward questions is what I will call your CEO nugget. So I'll basically ask you for a word of wisdom or piece of advice. And I often phrase the question: if you can jump into a time machine, what would you tell your younger business self? And the idea is really to get really great advice because you have more than likely lived it. Is rooted in potentially some type of failure, potentially some type of success as well too. But the idea is that advice you would give yourself is probably really phenomenal advice that other entrepreneurs and business owners can learn from as well. So that's kind of like the idea of the CEO nugget. It's not necessarily tangible like the CEO hack. The CEO hack is something that you can, implement or do, or a habit that you have, where the CEO nugget is not something you can necessarily put your hands on. It's not even tangible. So it's just like a piece of advice. And I always visualize if I was just like talking to my grandparents or something like that, they would, be in their rocker chair and they tell you some really phenomenal advice. That's kind of like the idea of the CEO nugget. I'm sorry. The second question that I'll ask. So again, it could be related if you're doing something B2B. It could be something specific for the B2B audience that you see that entrepreneurs and business owners kind of struggle with or don't do as well. It could also be purely motivational, something that you wish that you really could tell yourself. It's just to kind of, trust your gut or be, make sure that you continue to fight the fight, continue to go forward in whatever it is that you feel is the right thing to do. Those are kind of consistent things that we've heard as well, as I've heard as well on the show. So the last and final question is kind of like the reason for the podcast itself, and that is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And I'll ask you, what does being a CEO mean to you? The goal is really to look at what it means to be a CEO, what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to be a business owner, and kind of hopefully spark a conversation around that. I think when you hear CEO, there's an immediate definition that goes with that. And I'm not necessarily looking to change that. I'm looking to open up people's eyes to different ways that you can be a CEO. And my belief is that there are CEOs literally everywhere, and a lot of it is a mindset. It's I'm not going to say religion, but it's just a way that you look at things and the way you approach things. So I believe you can be a CEO whether you are, working within a company, whether you have your own company and been doing it for the last 20 years, whether you have, one employee or no employees and you're a solopreneur. Maybe you have a team of contractors. Maybe you have a traditional business and you have a brick and mortar office and you have, hundreds of thousands of employees that you're in charge of. But the idea is really to look at what it means to be a CEO, and not necessarily for me to answer that, but for every person that's on the show to answer it. So really my job is to have different types of quote unquote CEOs on the show. So whether that be, your Uber driver that does it full time or does it even part time, or somebody that, has been doing their business for the last 50 years and they have a really strong workforce, and you can buy their stock stock on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's really the goal, for the podcast, is really to open up people's eyes to different ways to be an entrepreneur, business owner, or a CEO as well. So I'll ask everybody just, what does being a CEO mean to you? And that'll be the sixth and final set question that I'll ask you. I usually ask a combo question at the end, which is if there's anything additional you can let the readers and listeners know, and then how best they can get a hold of you. So that basically is an opportunity. If you have like a free offer, ebook, phone number, anything that you want to mention, we'll have those links in the show notes, because the form that you fill out will also have the links that you want to share as well. And then we'll also, of course, people will want to know how best to get a hold of you. So we'll have your contact information as well there in the show notes. So that basically closes everything out. And then for everybody that's on the show, we do three things. We share it out via social media. We also will, because I have a digital marketing company, I will send you basically a website audit of your website, an audit of your website, usually looking at it more from an SEO perspective. So you'll get that prior to your podcast going live. If you want to have a deeper conversation about that, we definitely can, but there's no pressure to do that. It's just kind of informational. And then, show you some gaps or opportunities that you might have in your website and things you can take advantage of. And then the last and final thing that I'll send you is you'll get an actual gift for being on the show. And the way that we get your information is we have a form to fill out to be on the show. When you fill out that form, one of the questions will be for your mailing address, and your mailing address is just so that you can get that gift. But basically, you fill out that form, you hit submit. When you hit submit on that form, it'll take you to the Monday or Friday, and you can choose whatever time works for your schedule. And then you'll get an invitation automatically. I'll get an invitation automatically, and we'll be set. And it's all according to whatever your time zone is. And basically, within that calendar invite, you'll also see a link that goes to Zoom, and that Zoom link will actually be whatever you will click so that you can enter the meeting at that time. So again, we have about 30 minutes of time during the interview, so if there's any technical issues or anything, we have enough kind of buffer time for that. I've done hundreds of interviews already, so really get an opportunity to really kind of take advantage of that and make sure everything goes well and goes according to plan. But that's basically it. I thank you so much. I hit about the 16-minute standpoint with this, which I'm super excited about because, as you see, that is my number. But if you have any questions, as always, you can always set up an intro call just to connect a little bit, or shoot us an email, and we can definitely, just connect, and then also, answer any questions that you have as well. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you on the show.